Good afternoon and welcome to the Berkshire Apprenticeship Service Mythbusting Degree Apprenticeships presentation. My name is Fiona Jones. I'm the Chief Executive of Slough Aspire, and we are an organisation working to promote apprenticeships, skills and training in the Thames Valley area. The presentation today is brought to you in association with Thames Valley Berkshire Local Enterprise Partnership, and the Learning and Work has helped with the production of this set of slides and the toolkit being presented today. For any questions that you might have, either during the presentation or after, if I can ask everybody to please put through their questions on the Google Hangouts, or alternatively, you can email them through to us at info@berkshire-apprenticeships.co.uk, and I will pick up any questions at the end of this presentation. Thank you. So just to run you through some of the aims and objectives for today's presentation. The purpose of the presentation is to really sort of give an opportunity to explain, introduce and get you more familiar with the government's recent reforms and what they were aiming to do, and also what really constitutes an apprenticeship and how the system works for you. We're also going to be looking at what degree apprenticeships are, the kind of benefits that they bring, and how they add value overall within the apprenticeship system. And to give you a bit of an understanding of how the Berkshire Apprenticeship Service works and what we can do to help local employers in the Berkshire area to engage with either potential apprentices, get their apprenticeship scheme set up and running, work with training providers, and so on. So, to give you a starting point, what is an apprenticeship? Now, an apprenticeship is a genuine job. It's a job. It's not some fanciful training course. It's not just something. It is a job with an employer, and alongside that job, there is an assessment and skills program that will allow the individual doing that job to develop the skills, knowledge, behaviours, attitudes that are required to perform at the standard needed. So that's what it is. It's a way for individuals to earn while they learn. It's a bit of a hackneyed phrase, but it's quite key to the nature of an apprenticeship that you are in paid employment for the duration of your apprenticeship, and that you are a worker and an employee of the organisation that you are based in. It presents an opportunity to engage with learning in a wide range of ways. So it's going to be a mix of different types of learning. You might be learning in the workplace. You might be getting some kind of formal off-the-job training in a classroom type environment. It could be that you're getting an opportunity to test out skills that you've learned somewhere else in that work environment. It could be a mixture of both. There may be e-learning elements, there may be workshops, it could be one day a week, it could be blocks of time at different points during the overall apprenticeship. So there's quite a wide range that you can do that. And apprenticeships come at a range of levels in lots of different occupations and lots of different sectors. So gone are the days of it being the notion of sort of manual trades, and it's to do with people fixing things. There's a whole range of different apprenticeships, industries, sectors that have embraced this opportunity to train and develop the workforce that they need to do the job. The key thing for apprenticeships to stress about the way that they have an impact on the economic productivity and the role that they play is encapsulated by this notion at the foot of this slide. So an apprenticeship provides a typical return of 26 to 28 pounds for every pound of government investment in apprenticeships, and that's just at levels 2 and 3. So right from the starting level of apprenticeships, they have an impact and a return on investment that is far above the initial investment that they're given. So that's where an apprenticeship starts their journey. So From an employer's point of view, an apprenticeship needs to have an agreement in place from the employer with the apprentice throughout the period of that apprenticeship that is clear for both those parties. And there needs to be some kind of statement that links the apprentice, the employer, and the provider of the training for the apprenticeship all together. So it's a very collaborative administrative process where all of those sort of groups and individuals form part of the creation of the apprenticeship itself. So it is a written agreement with the providers and the apprenticeship employer. So they have a written agreement which will outline what the contract is between the employer and the training provider and what they're committing to do, what the training will look like. And quite key to this is the minimum term for an apprenticeship is that it's 1 year. So one day is the minimum you can be doing an apprenticeship for. That is not the maximum. Many apprenticeships will run for a period of years. That could be over 2 or 3 years, or in some cases it will go all the way up to 7 years for an apprenticeship program in some industries. Law is one of the examples of an area where we have a much longer period of time for apprenticeships taking place in that industry. So the apprentice must be paid. It is a paid job. As I said to start with, an apprenticeship is a job. It's a real job, just like any other. So the apprentice will be paid a wage for their age that is relevant. So if it is paid against national minimum wage standards, those are age banded. So whether you are 16, 19, 21, there will be variations in the national minimum wage and national living wage for individuals in those age brackets. They get paid for the time they're at work and the time that they're doing study. So it's not that for the time where they're doing the training, they're not being paid, they're being paid full time for the position, and the training is integral to that. Throughout the apprenticeship, there must be updates on how they're doing, communication between employer and training provider. Weekly working and training hours need to be logged, and there needs to be a system that allows them to input their patterns of work and their training time and track that with the training provider. So the employer needs to commit to allowing the individual on the apprenticeship to have that time to do the work and training provision work that they need to do as part of the apprenticeship process. So it is a very joined up, interrelated link between the employer, the training provider, and the apprentice themselves. So looking at it from the training point of view, as a training provider, they deliver the training to the apprenticeship so that the apprentice can develop the right skills, the right knowledge, behaviours, attitudes, and so on that meet with the standard of the apprenticeship. And we'll come to standards in a moment. So where it required, the apprenticeship training provider will need to put in place adequate support for the apprentice, whether that's about things like getting through maths and English up to level 2, which is the minimum that they need to complete as part of all apprenticeships. So quite important, making sure that they've got the minimum literacy and numeracy standards in order to move forward with their overall qualification. And training providers will be responsible for assessing that to start with. They must deliver assessments of the apprentice in the workplace. So continually feeding back on how they're doing and how effective that apprentice is being. They need to prepare the apprentice for the endpoint assessment process. So there will be elements of prep linked to what that individual will have to go through at the endpoint assessment process. And again, we will pick up more on endpoint assessments in a moment. There is a contract that the training provider will need to have in place with the endpoint assessment organisation, and if necessary, with a specific one identified by the employer or with the one that they have mutually agreed they will use for the purposes of the apprenticeship. And the training provider is responsible for facilitating all those arrangements. And arrangements will need to be reviewed and looked at around what would happen in the event that someone didn't pass their endpoint assessment on the first occasion, and what the consequences are of that. So the training provider is very key to building that relationship with the endpoint assessment organisation. They're also there really as a support system for the employer. So they can provide advice on things like the funding rules and what the government requirements for the standard for the apprenticeship, and they're a translator, if you will, for the system for the employer. So as an employer, do talk to your training provider. Find out as much as you can about what they can do to help. And if you've got questions, go to them, talk to them. The most successful apprenticeships are where everybody keeps talking and where you work collaboratively, training provider, employer, and apprentice. A big element of the new government changes around the apprenticeship process is the introduction of what's called the 20%. So apprentices are required to spend 20% of their time in off-the-job learning. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to spend 1 day a week. There's lots of different ways that this can be done. So key to the off-the-job training is that it must be relevant to the apprenticeship framework or standard that the person is studying. So it might be about theory. It could be about what is the theories behind the particular standard that's going on. So it might be about going to a lecture on perhaps finance systems if you're doing an ATT apprenticeship. Or it could be about completing a webinar on the available systems for processing payments online. So theoretical elements. So it could be role play, simulation exercises, online learning. It could be manufacturer training, training you to use specific bits of equipment that you need to use to do the job. It could be practical training. You might have to go and do some mentoring or shadowing in a workplace, working on a visit to a specific type of workplace. It could be getting involved in competitions where you get to test your skills against another organisation, perhaps something like the World Skills Competition itself. Learning support and time on assessments and assignments. Those are all things that build into this 20%. So off the job, however, doesn't include English and maths, progress reviews or on-programme assessment time, and training that takes place outside of the apprentice's paid working hours. So really important to understand that if they're doing it on their own time in the evenings and that they don't normally work evenings, then that would be considered outside of their working hours. So really important when the employer is looking at mapping that training time, it does need to be in line with what an apprentice would normally work. Evidencing off-the-job training. Now, the evidence is quite important because if it's not tracked properly, it might not be able to count. So again, do have that conversation with your training provider if you're an employer listening to this, to say, what's the tracking process? How can we as the employer feed into that tracking process? And where do we fit into the equation? What's the responsibility of the apprentice? Is there specific software that can be used for that tracking? Or is it manual, recorded, handwritten sheets? What is the process? So evidence to support the funding should include details of how it is delivered and how it's quantified. You need to make sure that key information about hours and so on are very clear in that whole thing, and that there is a proposed plan for the duration of the apprenticeship about how you're going to go about it. At the end of the day, what's important is that the apprentice has an adequate amount of time to both take on board and then utilise key information so that they can then develop the skills needed to do the job. A big change that the government has brought in the last couple of years is the apprenticeship levy. Many of you might have heard this term, but a lot of people are still not quite sure how it works, how it affects them, and whether it's something they need to be paying a lot of attention to. So let's have a look at some of the basics to do with the levy. As a UK employer in any sector, if your pay bill is more than £3 million per year, you will be liable to pay the apprenticeship levy. The levy constitutes 0.5% of your pay bill, and it is paid to HMRC through PAYE process, alongside income tax and national insurance. So it's taken out at that point in the payroll. There is an allowance of £15,000 to offset against the levy liability. So it's not actually a cash payment, so it doesn't feature on your digital account and you can't use it to purchase training. What it does is it helps to create a gap or a boundary at that 3 million point mark. If you're somebody whose salary bill is just 3 million, or depending on the time of year might fluctuate above and below the 3 million point, that £15,000 gives you sort of a safety net so that you're not put in a position where you're having to pay the levy when you shouldn't be paying the levy. So that's the purpose of that £15,000 offset. If you're an employer in England who is paying the levy, then you can use that to get 10% through the digital accounts as a top up on your levy payment. So there is something that you are getting in addition to the money that you're putting into your levy account. An employer can calculate, report and pay their levy to employers with multiple PAYE schemes if they only have one allowance. So that would be in the case where you have payrolls running within one large employer. And employers who are connected by ownership or control will be allowed to share one allowance. If you have several employers who are connected as a group, they will only have one £15,000 levy allowance. So if you know that your organisational structure is more complex, or where you have multiple business entities that sit together, then we strongly suggest that you come along and have a chat either with ourselves at the Berkshire Apprenticeship Service or with the National Apprenticeship Service and your local representative from the National Apprenticeship Service. If you're in the South East region, that will be Steve Nicholson from the National Apprenticeship Service. But please do get in touch with us if you would like to get in touch with them, and we can facilitate that introduction. Really important with the levy is that the funds that are paid into the levy, which each month out of your payroll get paid into your digital account, will expire 24 months after they appear on the digital account unless they're spent on apprenticeship training. So anything that goes into the account has a 24-month lifespan. At the point where the 24 months start to kick in, and for many employers that will be the 1st of April 2019, the money that you've paid in will start going back out again, and it will be done monthly in line with the payments monthly going in. So really important, if you're a levy payer who's been paying up till now into the levy and you haven't yet started to draw down your funds, you are getting closer and closer to the point where the funds will start to be taken away. So do, again, get in touch with us and we can give you some advice on how to move things forward. If you're not a levy payer, so for those of you who have less than 3 million in your salary bill, and in the UK, that's a lot of employers. Anybody who's a smaller employer who doesn't have that high level of salary bill, then you are still able to access apprenticeships and apprenticeship funding. In fact, as a smaller employer, you will be able to access 90%. Just paying a 10% top up on what the government provides to pay the cost of your apprenticeship training. And in some cases, with very small employers, so if you've less than 50 employees and you take on somebody who is between 16 and 18 years of age, or 19 to 24 years of age, who previously was within the care system, or education, care, health plan, which is for young people with additional needs, then you might get 100% of your training costs covered. Now, employers who haven't paid use a list of training providers that are open to them who have registered to deliver to non-levy employers. There are two registers of providers who are paying using non-levy, and providers who are working with levy-paying employers. In some cases, you will have the same provider on both lists, and in some cases, training providers will have opted to be on one list or the other. And if you are a levy-paying employer and you spend all of the money in your levy pot, but you want to take on more apprentices, you may still be able to use some additional funding from the government to levy pot. So quite a lot of flexibility here. But again, any questions, please do get in touch with us at the Berkshire Apprenticeship Service. Now, one of the big changes that the government brought in was the move from apprenticeship frameworks to apprenticeship standards. Within the framework process, you began with initial assessment that moved through to on and off the job training, often with an MBQ certificate. There might have been mandatory qualifications, maths and English. There was something about personal learning thinking styles, and the employment rights and responsibilities as a compulsory module. There would be completion and certification, and assessment and sign-off at occupational competence. With the new standards, which have been driven through the Trailblazer process by employers themselves, so every new standard had a strong cohort of involved in developing and structuring and producing that standard. They have an initial assessment process where the person is put in place. The qualifications differ between standards. Some have qualifications, some don't. Although some training providers have chosen to include additional qualifications as part of a standard. There are individual plans throughout, so that there is then a gateway point. Now, at that gateway point, which will be mutually agreed between the training provider and the apprentice employer, so that they don't put the apprentice forward until they're ready to step through that gateway and go through the endpoint assessment process, at which point, on completion of that endpoint assessment and successful completion, they will be certified and that statement of occupational competence will be in place. So with that, some really useful things to be aware of. National minimum wage for apprentices rose this year up to £3.70. That is the minimum though. And while some employers may choose to pay the minimum, many employers have taken the decision to pay more than that, paying national living wage or higher. So every apprentice role, and do have a look at what the apprenticeship salary is for that role. The new apprenticeship reforms only apply in England, so the piece around having an endpoint assessment organisation who's coming in at the end of the process to independently verify, that's one of the key things that's come in, but it does only apply here in England. There are financial incentives for employers for recruiting 16 to 18-year-olds and 16 to 25-year-olds for young people with education, health and care plans. But I must stress, apprenticeships are not just for young people. People of all ages are available and can do an apprenticeship. So there is no restriction on somebody of any age doing an apprenticeship. There is some extra funding available for training providers to provide essential maths and English training to apprentices. And one of the things that's come in just from August of this year is the fact that there are now bursaries for care leavers. So if you're a young person who was in the care of the local authority as you were growing up, you may find that you're eligible for a £1,000 bursary to be paid to you when you undertake an apprenticeship. So really helpful bonus for somebody who perhaps is living independently as a young person and will have additional costs by taking on an apprenticeship. So that gives you a snapshot of what apprenticeships are. So moving on to what an apprenticeship could be in terms of a degree apprenticeship. If we look at the levels of apprenticeship as a starting point, apprenticeships range from level 2 all the way through to level 7. So if you're looking in terms of complexity of what the training element involves, relevant or relative levels of complexity, you're looking at a GCSE. So it's about the same level of complexity as a GCSE would be. Level 3 puts you on the same footing as an A-level. At level 4, higher national certificate, also known as a HNC. Level 5 takes you up to that foundation degree or HND, higher national diploma level. A level 6 would be a degree, and a level 7 would be a master's degree. So that gives you the levels of complexity, what they're equivalent to. For the purposes of the rest of our discussion this afternoon, then we will be looking at those level 6 and level 7 qualifications that are available, what is available as a degree and a master's degree programme. So what's a degree apprenticeship? You can do degree apprenticeships in all kinds of industries. It can be in science, it could be in astrophysics, or it could be in medicine, it could be in law, it could be in video production. There are a very wide range of industries who are taking on and embracing the value that degree apprenticeships bring and the opportunity to upskill individuals to the level that those industries, those employers need without having to have somebody who's gone away and learned lots of theoretical knowledge on a university course that might not come with that specific level of knowledge. They've got the qualification, but not that knowledge and understanding of this particular industry or job role. So key to a degree apprenticeship process is the fact that the training provider will be working with a university or will be a university itself to deliver that degree apprenticeship. So universities have degree awarding powers. That is what a university is. With all the other things that go on, at the heart of it, universities have the right to confer degrees. So a degree apprenticeship will have a degree that is granted by a university as part of their apprenticeship programme. The training provider, maybe the university itself. A good example is the Henley Business School, which is part of the University of Reading, will deliver a level 7 master's degree in business administration as an apprenticeship. So you could have equivalent to the Henley Business School flexible MBA, but done as a degree apprenticeship at level 7. Alternatively, you might be working with a training provider who is then with the university in the background to use that university's degree granting powers over their training provision. There's a number of organisations working collaboratively with the University College of Estate Management to grant quality surveying, quantity surveying degrees within the industry. So in each case, find out when, as an employer, as an individual going on to an apprenticeship, who is your training provider, who is the university that is granting it, and find out that information and get that understanding of who is granting the degree and where that degree will be coming from, but also who's going to be the front-facing interface, that training provider for the programme. So in terms of degree apprenticeships, it is a real degree. Anybody who says it's not a real degree is confused. A degree apprenticeship gives you an actual degree. It will be granted by a university who has the right to grant a degree, and you will have done all of the work and training required to get that degree. And it is just as good a degree as any degree sat by a student at a university on a full-time basis who is not employed in a job at the same time. So anyone over 60 and not in full-time education can do an apprenticeship and can do a degree apprenticeship. As a 16-year-old through or higher in order for you to have the readiness to start the process. The key thing is around whether or not your existing qualifications may have a bearing on whether or not you're eligible to that particular process, a program of study. So an example, already had a degree in business administration and you went to do a business administration degree apprenticeship, it would be argued that you were doing the same thing over again and therefore you wouldn't be eligible for the funding for that process. However, if you had done a business degree and you wanted to do an engineering degree apprenticeship, then that would be sufficiently different for you to be able to undertake that degree. For many employers, they've looked at the role that they can use leadership and management apprenticeships at higher and degree levels to upskill management staff. And again, being able to take somebody who might be a graduate with a great qualification, but put them through a management skills process to get that additional training. So really important to have that conversation with the training provider and the employer at the point of recruitment around your eligibility. But if you're a young person coming out of school, aged 18, just completed perhaps a BTEC higher diploma or a A-level process and looking to start a degree apprenticeship, then there's some great opportunities for you out there to gain that degree education without having to go to university, take on quite a lot of debt and so on. So the benefits of a degree apprenticeship are for employers that they get to attract quality talent. They can get the training co-funded by government. They can train people to do the job that needs to be done. They can mould an individual to fit with their organisation rather than having somebody who comes with a preconceived notion of what the job or an organisation should involve. From the learner's perspective, they're employed, they're going to be paid a wage. They get what's essentially free training, and that could be free training up to a value of £27,000. Many of the engineering and scientific programs, but across a range of the standards, the cost of those programs can be as high as £27,000. And as an apprentice, you are not in any way required to pay the cost of that qualification. It is the employer who will pay the cost of the qualification with government funding to support the employer. So as an apprentice, you get a degree level qualification that could be worth up to £27,000, and you will not have had to pay the level of tuition fees that a young person attending a university would be expected to cover. You apply for it just like a normal job. So there's not a special register anywhere. You would apply to a job with a company to do that qualification. And for any vacancy process, you would apply in the normal way, whether it would be at a CV and cover letter type request from an employer or an application form. And the employers work collaboratively with the training providers to get the best outcomes. It's not in anybody's interest to not talk to each other, to not collaborate, to not be part of the process. At the end of the day, the employer and the training provider both have a vested interest in the apprentice being successful in completing their apprenticeship. So it is a really collaborative process. So just on that issue of the finances around doing a degree apprenticeship, if we were to look at starting salaries, now they can start at £8,000, but equally some apprenticeship salaries can go up to £25,000. Depends on the employer, programme of studies, skills required, certificate gained, all of that. There's a link there through to a summary of salary information produced by Glassdoor, which gives a good range of different apprenticeship salary rates in industry, and an insight into the fact that employers aren't paying the minimum. They are paying wide-ranging salaries that are competitive with entry-level roles in their industries, because they know that if they want to attract the best talent, then they need to pay that talent market rates for those roles. Now, compare that with a university student on a full-time degree programme, an average of 3 years full-time study, paying potentially £9,000 per year for that study, for that course. That could be £27,000 just on tuition fees alone. In addition, many students accumulate additional debt around living costs, housing and so on, enabling them to study away from home. And so by the end of their degree, they might have got upwards of £50,000 worth of debt that they've incurred by doing that degree. A degree apprentice, on the other hand, could earn in excess of £60,000 over without having any debts. They will have gained more. And so they will actually be much more competitive than a graduate who has the same level of qualification but doesn't have that experience, in-depth knowledge of being in that work environment. So it puts them in a very competitive place. And over the course of their earning lifetime, an apprentice can earn up to £150,000 more than if they hadn't gone down an apprenticeship route for their studies. So some really huge benefits for being an apprentice and going down that route of learning and earning at the same time. For anyone looking for some more information, please do have a look at some of these links. We've got some great links here. That first one is a list of all of the companies that currently have degree apprenticeship opportunities within their organisations, up and down the country, all over the place. Lots of interesting opportunities to apply for, get involved in, and that is updated on a regular basis so that people will always have that key bit of data about who's got degree apprenticeship vacancies at the moment. There's also a link there to a full list of all of the degree level standards. So these are the new qualifications that I mentioned earlier in the presentation that talk about what is in each of those standards. It takes you through which employers inputted into developing the standard. And again, a good insight into the breadth of industry that is offering apprenticeships at the moment. It's a great guide to apprenticeships from the government website and gives you a bit of an insight into the overall apprenticeship process, both for apprenticeships in general and an employer's guide for any employers out there who want to get a bit more knowledge. You put together a really good video case study with a degree apprenticeship through Aston University. Take time, have a bit of a watch, gets you a good insight into that experience of how universities fit into the apprenticeship process. And do take some time to have a look at the Getting Go Far YouTube channel. Some great videos on there from apprentices talking about the difference that being an apprentice has made to them. Additionally, got some links there, just some useful reading on degree apprenticeships. So some background, a bit about degree apprenticeships from Rate My Apprenticeship, some more stuff from UCAS on what degree apprenticeships are available, the Which Guide to Degree Apprenticeships and Higher Apprenticeships, really useful summation from Which there on what's involved in that process. Degree apprenticeship, nice piece from the Independent there and from the HR director on some of those costs and earning differentials for people doing apprenticeships and for young people involved. So do have a look through some of those links, give you some good background information. Also there on the links, there's just four there that take you through the levy process. So if you're a levy paying employer out there, do have a look at some of those links and look at the Institute for Apprenticeships. And if you're here in Berkshire, then please do go on to the Thames Valley Berkshire Local Enterprise Partnerships data store on their website. They have a brilliant document store of all kinds of reports and data that relate to the Berkshire area, and some brilliant insights there into the state of play for apprenticeships and the apprenticeship levy over the last couple of years. So do have a look at their document store and some of the reports that they've produced around both apprenticeships and skills in this area in general. They've also got some great infographics on different sectors and industries in the Thames Valley Berkshire area that can be very useful for giving you an insight into working in those industries. So before we finish today, just to take you through who the Berkshire Apprenticeship Service is. So the Berkshire Apprenticeship Service is a hub managed by Slough Spire, and we host the Berkshire Apprenticeship Service, which is managed by the Winter Forest Colleges Group. And it is supported by a range of training providers from across the Thames Valley area, as well as in partnership with the Thames Valley Berkshire Local Enterprise Partnership, the European Union European Social Fund, and the Education and Skills Funding Agency. The Berkshire Apprenticeship Service is here to help connect businesses with the best training providers. So we can help you find the training provider who's got those standards, got those delivery patterns that work best for you as an employer. We can provide training needs analysis assessments. If you're an employer who's out there who's heard about apprenticeship, maybe you're just thinking about workforce development in your organisation in general and you'd like to get a bit of a helping hand, we can come in and do a full assessment of the organisation, look at where your skills gaps are and what the best source of training, whether apprenticeship or other training, might be to fill those skills gaps. So get in touch with us today about training needs analysis assessments. We can and training options. So what's out there? What's the best? Is it business administration? Is it engineering? What are the things that could be making the difference for your organisation? We run a variety of workshops and events about apprenticeships that help link you up with potential apprentices, with potential training providers, help solve some of those questions that you might have as an employer about what your options are. Please do go to www.berkshire-apprenticeships.co.uk/events to find out when our next event is and get some information about the opportunities. And we are always getting involved in creating new materials to promote apprenticeships in Berkshire. So again, visit our website to find out more. Big thing for us is the Berkshire Apprenticeship Awards. Now, the awards are taking place on the 22nd of November, and we are very excited that our awards event will be at the Legoland Windsor Resort Hotel over in the Windsor area, and it's going to be a great event. We have got 9 categories of awards out there for you to enter, everything from Star Apprentice to Star Apprentice Line Manager, Best Employer, Best and Most Innovative Education-Based Training Initiative to encourage people to do apprenticeships. So all you schools out there, it's a great opportunity to get your profile raised, whether you're a business, whether you're a young person on an apprenticeship, whether you're an adult, award just for you. So please do visit our Apprenticeship Awards website, which is www.berkshire-apprenticeships.co.uk/apprenticeship awards. Just our contact details gives you the information we have. If you'd like to give us a call, it's 01753 793370, or send us an email, visit the website. But you can also find us on Instagram and on Twitter. So if we've had any questions, I'll just check my list now. We haven't had any questions yet, but before we sign off, just to say again, please do send us any questions that you have. We're always here. So that info@berkshire-apprenticeships.co.uk, send us an email, we'll get back to you. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it useful, and we are here if you need us. Berkshire Apprenticeship Service. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.